In this segment, let us study the white matter of cerebrum. White matter lies deep to the cortex and forms bulk of the cerebral hemisphere. It's made up of nerve fibers, and based upon what these nerve fibers are connecting, they're categorized into three groups. The first group is the association fibers. They connect two areas within the same cerebral hemisphere. Second group is the commissural fibers. They connect the left and the right hemispheres. Third group is the projection fibers. They connect cerebral hemisphere with some subcortical center. It could be diencephalon, brainstem, cerebellum, or spinal cord. Now coming to the association fibers, they are classified as short association fibers, or otherwise known as arcuate fibers. These connect adjacent gyri, that is precentral gyrus connected with postcentral gyrus, or precentral gyrus connected with the premotor area. So those are the short association fibers, or otherwise known as arcuate fibers. Then we have long association fibers, which connect areas which are away from each other within the same cerebral hemisphere. That is frontal lobe connected with the occipital lobe, or frontal lobe connected with the temporal lobe. These are the long association fiber bundles. Short association fibers can be intracortical, that is, they travel from one gyrus, they pass through the cortex itself and reach the destination gyrus. Or they may pass between the wall of the sulcus, that is, the fibers which have to go from the precentral gyrus to the postcentral gyrus, they will be passing through the wall of the central sulcus. Or they can be subcortical, that is, they start from the cortex, reach the white matter, and then go back to reach the destination gyrus. Now these are the only short association fibers which will be contributing to white matter. The second group is the long association fibers. They have definite names. We have uncinate fasciculus, which connects Broca's area and orbitofrontal cortex in the frontal lobe with the temporal pole. So these fibers will be turning around the stem of the lateral sulcus. They connect some areas in the frontal lobe with the temporal pole. The second group of long association fiber bundle is the cingulum. This will be underlying the cingulate cortex. It connects subcallosal area and cingulate gyrus with the parahippocampal gyrus and adjacent temporal lobe areas. This is part of the Papez circuit, which is an important part of the circuit which will be governing memory. Then we have superior longitudinal fasciculus. It connects frontal lobe with the occipital lobe, especially areas 18 and 19. Some of these fibers will also continue forward into temporal lobes. We have inferior longitudinal fasciculus, which connects occipital lobe with the temporal lobe. Running parallel to the superior longitudinal fasciculus, we have fronto-occipital fasciculus. Again, the fibers will be connecting areas in the frontal lobe with the areas in the occipital lobe. But superior longitudinal fasciculus is separated from the fronto-occipital fasciculus by the descending fibers of corona radiata. Within the occipital lobe, we have perpendicular fasciculus, which connects ventral visual areas with dorsal visual areas. And we also have arcuate fasciculus, which connects the Wernicke's sensory speech area with Broca's motor speech area. It is not shown here, but that's again a long association fiber bundle. Now coming to the commissural fibers, these are the fibers which connect the two cerebral hemispheres. They are further classified as homotopic fibers and heterotopic fibers. Homotopic commissural fibers connect corresponding areas in the two cerebral hemispheres. That is, area 4 in the left hemisphere is connected with the area 4 of the right hemisphere. Whereas heterotopic commissural fibers connect dissimilar areas within the two cerebral hemispheres. That is, area 4 of the left hemisphere is connected with area 6 on the right hemisphere, or even area 312 of the right hemisphere. Now let us see which are the commissural fiber bundles. The largest commissural fiber bundle is the corpus callosum. Other commissural fibers are the anterior commissure, which is located just below and behind the corpus callosum. We have commissure of the fornix, which is again located below the corpus callosum, and along the stalk of the pineal gland. At its upper end we have habenular commissure, at its lower end we have the posterior commissure. So these are the various commissural fibers which we have. Corpus callosum being the largest, let us first study that. That is actually the largest fiber bundle among all the fibers which are located in the central nervous system. It's about 10 centimeters long, and along most of its length it forms the roof of the lateral ventricle. Its anterior end is about 4 centimeters behind the frontal pole. Its posterior end is about 6 centimeters anterior to the occipital pole. Coming to its parts, its anterior end is known as genu, or a bend. That is where you're seeing the corpus callosal fibers turning. The lower extension, which is a thinner lamina, is known as rostrum. The upper extension, which is a thicker lamina, is the main part known as trunk. It curves further backwards where it ends as a posterior thickened part known as splenium. So the parts of corpus callosum include rostrum, genu, trunk, and the splenium. Now coming to the relations of corpus callosum, above it is related to cingulate gyrus, below it is related to septum pellucidum anteriorly and fornix posteriorly. Along the midline on its upper aspect, it is related to great longitudinal fissure which contains a fold of duramater known as falx cerebri. Now within this falx cerebri, along its inferior margin, it contains inferior sagittal sinus, venous sinus. On either side of this duramater, we also have anterior cerebral arteries. So all these structures are related to upper surface of the corpus callosum. Also, the upper surface of the corpus callosum is covered by a thin sheet of grey matter known as indusium griseum. This is part of the hippocampal formation which we have studied in the limbic lobe video. And that indusium griseum on either side is covered by two bands of white matter known as longitudinal striae. They are named as medial and lateral longitudinal striae. Now coming to the relations of splenium. Splenium is related to thalami on either side. Along the midline, it is related to pineal gland just below the splenium, and further below the pineal gland, it is related to tectum of the midbrain. Here we are also seeing that the hippocampus and dentate gyrus is continuous posteriorly at the gyrus faciolaris, which then continues above the corpus callosum as the indusium griseum as well as the longitudinal striae. The fiber bundle of the hippocampus is the fornix. Now that continues on the undersurface of the corpus callosum. In addition to these structures, it's also related to the tela choroidea, or a fold of pyometer containing choroid plexus of third ventricle, which will pass through the transverse fissure just below the corpus callosum. And other structure which is behind or below the splenium is the internal cerebral veins of both sides. They join together to form the great cerebral vein. Now let us talk about the various fibers which are present in the corpus callosum. The fibers of rostrum will connect the orbitofrontal cortex of both sides. That is, orbitofrontal cortex of the left side will connect with the orbitofrontal cortex of the right side, passing through the rostrum. The fibers in the genu will connect the frontal poles of both sides, because when you see from top, it will give an impression as though the fibers are forming the two prongs of a forceps. So this is the area which is, or these fiber bundles is known as forceps minor. The fibers which are starting from the trunk will travel laterally to reach the frontal and parietal lobes. These fibers will be passing through the corona radiata fibers which are descending downwards. Now these fibers are traversing laterally. Fibers which will start from the posterior end of the trunk as well as from the splenium, they will form the roof and the lateral wall of the lateral ventricle, as well as the central part as well as the posterior limb. Now this thin sheet is known as tapetum. And finally, the fibers which will start from the splenium will travel back to the occipital pole. Now again, it resembles prongs of the forceps, so they are known as forceps major. So what is the function of corpus callosum? It transfers information between hemispheres by connection with homotopic areas or heterotopic areas. A simple example, let's say I'm a right-handed person. I have learned to write my alphabets using my right hand. God forbid, but if I have a fracture in my right hand and I can't use my right hand for writing anymore, so I can use my left hand to write. However, my handwriting will never be the same, but I don't have to relearn how to write alphabets just because I'm now using left hand. That information is already transferred to the right hemisphere, which will control the action of left hand. Now, what are the effects of lesion to the corpus callosum? Surgical section of corpus callosum, actually it leaves very few difficulties, but one feature which can be seen is patient probably will not be able to read things in the left visual fields, because the left visual field will be sending the information to the right cerebral cortex. Now that information has to be sent to the left hemisphere through the corpus callosum for the left angular gyrus, which is the reading center, to perceive. So that will be absent. Then we have lesion to the splenium, which will again result in alexia without agraphia or aphasia, because speech centers are not involved. So there is no agraphia or aphasia, but there is alexia. Again, the information is not being shifted from the visual field of the right side to the visual field of the left side. There is a congenital absence of corpus callosum, otherwise known as agenesis of corpus callosum. It may result in no symptoms at all, or it may be associated with seizures, some mental deficiencies, or even a patient may have monotonous speech. Now coming to other commissures, the anterior commissure, which is located below and behind the rostrum of the corpus callosum, and it is just above the lamina terminalis, which is a sheet of white matter. It's also located between the precommissural and postcommissural columns of fornix. It forms the anterior wall of the third ventricle. Now, these fibers which are located within the anterior commissure, they divide into two bundles on either side. An anterior bundle which connects olfactory tract of both sides, and posterior bundle which connects temporal lobes, amygdala and nucleus accumbens of both sides. Similarly, we have commissure of fornix. The fornix is basically an efferent fiber pathway of the hippocampus. So commissure of fornix will connect hippocampus of one side with the hippocampus of other side. Then we have the habenular commissure, which will be connecting amygdala and habenular nuclei of both sides. We have posterior commissure, which mainly connect the superior colliculi and pretectal regions of both sides. In addition, they will be connecting other areas, but remember, it connects the superior colliculus of left side with the right side, and also the pretectal nuclei of left side with the right side. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this video. We will be studying the projection fibers in the next video. You can visit the site for other neuroanatomy videos. Thank you.